How would you describe the way your group rose to the occasion after Mark left the game?
Yeah, really proud of the effort. I think, sometimes when you lose your number one center, you lose a key piece to your lineup. There can be a bit of a sag and emotional letdown. But I thought the guys really rallied around it. Coming in to the intermission, finding out that he's not coming back. The guys were upbeat that guys needed to step up. I thought Vlad had a heck of a game. Happy Nino, throughout the lineup, guys really, playing more minutes. Bear, and they do a good job. They tie the game, but I thought in the second period we did a great job forechecking, getting to our identity, getting pucks to the net, and a couple of huge goals to go into the intermission with a lead. So for the most part, I thought guys did a great job. He's a big piece of our lineup. That's a huge hole, and not one guy's gonna fill that void. But even the guy next to me stepped up and he had a heck of a game.
Kyle, what did you see from Vlad stepping up with your line?
Yeah, great job. I mean, kind of like Law said, we needed it from everybody, and I thought he rose to the occasion. Obviously, I agree with Laws. It's not one guy just needs to fill the shoes of Mark. It needs to be everybody. And the way he plays, Vladdy, I think he's been great through the whole series. And a couple chances here or there, he could have some better results. And you see it tonight. And he drives harder than that. He plays all the hard areas very well, defends well, and obviously a key contributor on through those goals there.
Kyle, you set up Vladdy's game-winning goal, and on that rush, he's a new line mate for you. He's a lefty. He's not a righty like you guys normally are. What adjustments do you have to make on that play to make sure it works?
Yeah, just obviously be aware of where he is. It's you kind of read that rush coming into it before I get the pass that he's on that side, and he did a great job of putting himself in a lane to be able for me to get that there kind of in between his stick, and he did the rest. Just great finish around the net.
Adam, I think a few guys have said this is probably the best game you guys have played. Jim Montgomery just said this is the best game you seen from you guys, and it was a defense first sort of effort. What were you guys able to do that held them to so few shots and great ace?
Yeah, I think outside of that first goal where our line has some breakdowns and just some miscues. We talked about a lot of the offense we were giving up in St. Louis was our doing. It was, us coming out of our structure, ours just not doing the things that we're accustomed to doing in the D zone, in the neutral zone. I thought we did a really good job of breaking pucks out, playing with structure in the D zone, keeping them to the outside. I thought our box outs by our D were great, allowed Helly to make some saves. And, I think the defending, it starts, when we're forechecking. I thought we did a really good job getting on their D, turning pucks over, spending time in the O zone. And, when they would get the puck to break out, they were just dumping it, to go for changes. And then in the third period, I thought we did a really good job of, if they'd get an entry, not giving lanes, not allowing them to get to the net. And, a lot of key shot blocks, Al, I could go down the list. There was a lot of big blocks, and that's what it takes. And, I think, Helly hasn't gotten enough credit in this series. That paddle save he makes, you can call it series changing, you can call it game changing, but, that was a key play, and, I thought he had a heck of a game. Disappointing to give up that third one for him, but, he kept us in it, and, he really shut the door when we got that lead.
You touched on a bunch of it there, but they played with a whole bunch of rhythm in games 3 and 4. And it seemed like you guys took it entirely away from them. Even when they had passes, they were passing in each other's skates. You guys were breaking it up with sticks. Vladdy described it as you guys doing your homework in the last couple of days. Can you give me an idea of what the last couple of days looked like to you guys to get to that game tonight?
Do you want me to answer that one?
Either. Yeah.
Okay, I can go. I think we go into St. Louis. We're up 2-0. We're feeling good with how we played, and feeling like we can get to another level. And I think a bit of it we get distracted going into the scrums. Kind of the extracurricular stuff, and they have a great start. And it was almost like we were protecting the lead in the series. I think tonight we played on our toes. We played fast. We were making simple but effective plays. And Arnie did a really good job of going through the breakdowns in game 3 and 4, and just when you review those things and you kind of see that a lot of it is self-inflicted. Not that it's an easy fix, but there's a structure we've played with, an expectation of where guys are supposed to be, and when we get back to that, we're a real tough team to get to the middle of the ice. We're a real tough team to score off of in zone plays, and we don't give up a whole lot in transition. So I think those adjustments, kind of the refresher of when we're at our best, what we look like, and when we're giving up 5-6 goals, what we also look like, and you kind of come off of it. So yeah, it was some good review. I thought we had a great practice yesterday, and getting G back in the lineup too. I thought for missing a few weeks, he had an impact right away. Some good chances early on. Some key blocks. He won a couple big face-offs for us down the stretch, and he's only going to get better as he gets more reps. So looking forward to Game 6.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that, Kyle. What the impact you thought that Gabe had on this game?
Yeah, he's great. We know what he brings to the table. Wins a ton of puck battles. Smart. Great defensively. Blocks a ton of shots. What he means to our power play. Just having that right shot. So he's a game changer, and glad he's back, feeling good.
Thanks, Ed.